So basically, what we'll be discussing today is more of a continuation of what we have discussed before. If we take into consideration the context of our previous discussion, we have talked about, we started with mission vision with Dr. Sumundong, and then we narrowed down to very specific topics no under leading strategically, specifically on planning. So we learned how to plan properly in order for us to lead strategically. It's important for us to revisit the framework all the time, okay? Because the framework dictates basically what will come out during the examination. So we are here in this portion here. This is leading strategically, okay? So at this point, you are tasked to really find ways to be able to lead your people properly. And it all starts with having the good mission vision, a deeper understanding of the DepEd vision mission, and using that understanding, you'll be able to plan properly and arrange your plans in such a way that you'll be able to really address the concerns. And remember, in the process of planning, remember that we are the field personnel. Okay? Kung sa Sundalo or the Philippine Army, we are the soldiers. The immediate head of these soldiers are the principals. Okay, so remember, we are under policies. Okay, so although as per RA 9155, we are empowered with the authority, the responsibility, still you are to act based on the bounds of law. So this is embodied in the issuances provided to us. In order for you to really deeply understand the policies, let's understand what are the different career stages in terms of policy implementation and review. So when you look at policy, it's a very important word. It could be defined as the laws and the issuances that you are bounded to. And these policies are also guidelines, provided that when we take it into consideration what I have shared last time, we are under the executive department. We are headed by Secretary Dr. Sumundong shared about the speech of Vice President Sara, which is also our concurrent Secretary of Education. As part of the executive department, we are to put into operation the laws and regulations embodied by the Constitution, and we try to execute this. And that's the reason why we are part of the executive department, because we execute laws. We make sure that they are implemented. But particularly in the Department of Education, we are here to implement the laws, the regulations, the provisions that will enable the learners to learn from us, because that is a constitutionally protected right of our children. It all starts with career stage 1. So we are to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the policy, implementation, and review to ensure that school operations are consistent with national, local laws, regulations, and issuances. Let's take note of the keywords here. We are to understand policy implementation and review. So policies are meant to be implemented, and they are also meant to be reviewed, because policy sometimes gets outdated. Policy sometimes creates unintended consequences, and it has a huge impact in everything that we do as we execute the laws in the Department of Education in delivering education to our people. Going back to the speech of our Vice President, if you try to, one of the most highlighted part for me that really personally touched me is how the Vice President revealed all the problems of the Department of Education without trying to sugarcoat everything. So honestly, these are problems that I myself have seen in the Department of Education as per product of research, and honestly, these are things now we have to really work on. And most of the people, especially the politicians, their tendency would really to sugarcoat everything. So that's a good thing. Now later on, we will understand how important it is for us to accept that there is a problem. Okay? Because when you start thinking of a problem and you think there's no problem, there's no issue or there's no agenda to talk about, then basically that problem won't be solved. Because the starting point of any action is acceptance of a flaw or a mistake. Honestly, that made me happy because it is an acceptance of the realities that we have seen in the field. In order for you to upgrade to career stage 2, criteria that we wanted to have is really to undertake policy implementation and review in schools to ensure operations are consistent with national and local law regulations and issuances. Okay, so the other one is consistency part here in career stage 2, undertake already the policies. So you should be able to implement it already in your level. In career stage 3, you are to involve the people. Okay, and it's important, no, the most important part here is really consistency with school operations with national, local laws, regulations, and issuances. Here in this part, ang highest na nga part, so we started with just demonstrating knowledge, then we undertake such policy, then we engage the stakeholders, and lastly, in career stage 4, we are to recommend to higher authorities the enhancement of policies. So this is already career stage 4. You're expected to provide inputs on the policies that we have. Now I have a question. Do we have really the ability to shape policies? Because honestly, if you look at Facebook, if you look at the field, there are a lot of clamors in terms of our policies. So what do you think of this? Do you think we have the ability to actually shape the policies that we have? Okay, what do you think? Just place it in the chat box. Can we shape the policies that are provided to us? Did you listen carefully to the speech of Vice President Sara when said teachers are not there to be blamed because they are part of a system that actually causes the problems that we have right now? That there are problems with policy. Pero in your part, is it possible for us to really change and shape policy? What do you think? Okay, may I have your responses on the chat box? Okay, I think no from Ma'am Jen. Okay, sige ma'am. Thank you so much for sharing that. Why do you think no? We don't have any powers to actually do that. Sige, can we add more aside from Ma'am Jen? Thank you for sharing, ma'am, your thoughts. Okay, how about the others? Let's make this interactive. Kay you won't learn if you just listen, no, and you don't think with me. So let's try to see. Is it possible for us to really change policy? Because it's really part of the strands. You look at here, demonstrate knowledge and understanding of policy implementation and review. So when you implement policies, these pertains to DepEd orders, memorandum, issuances. Do we have the power to shape it? So we have here from Sir Raul, policy is meant to be implemented lang, no? So thank you, Sir Raul. Then from Ma'am Emilia, yes, she agrees that we have the power to shape policy. Okay, maybe yes. Okay, very good, Ma'am Joanne. Okay, according to Ma'am Jennifer Sumpaini, we have policymakers. Ours is to implement. Okay, that's a very good point. Okay, I think I have shared that to you, diba, last time. Then Ma'am Cherry said no, Doc, because that is being finalized by experts. Okay, that's also a good point. So now you're having a good idea of what we'll be talking about today. So I think these are very good inputs from Ma'am Cherry May, no, and from Ma'am Jennifer. You look at this point, how the mechanism, because we are in a tripartite democracy. So what do you mean by tripartite? Exams at the beginning, what do you mean by tripartite democracy? Is the president really higher from the Congress? How about the judiciary? Okay, let's understand the kind of democracy that we have. It's a tripartite. What do you call it, tripartite democracy? Okay, I'm waiting for your responses in the chat box. Why is it called a tripartite democracy? Let's try to our discussion will start with the overall system of government that we have, and in order to understand how policy work in a democracy like this. Okay, so nganong tripartite man? What do you mean by tri? Very good. Sir Raul said it's the executive, judiciary, and the legislators, no, or the Congress. No. So akong pangutana is who is higher? No, who is higher in terms of all these three branches? Who is higher among this? Okay, very good. So master na to atong political system, ha. All of them are equal, no? So there is what you call in government check and balances. In fact, it's the legislative department who creates the laws. Okay, so they create the laws, and kana pag yun sa ilaha palang level, there are two houses, no? The lower house and the upper house, which is comprised, ang upper house is composed of the Senate, and then the lower house is composed by the Congress. Okay, so they are to create laws. They are to create laws. The problem with our system sometimes is that the ones creating laws are not even lawyers, no? So sometimes, although na ay mga gap ana that we have seen, but the idea here really in the Constitution is that we don't really need lawyers to create laws because what we want is representation of the people. The congressmen are meant to represent the people in the field. The Senate are meant to represent the perspective of the national level. So mo nang mga senador. Okay, so kung congressman ka o senador, actually equal ra gid mo og level ba. You are all representatives. That's why we call them representatives because they are meant to be representation of the people that they represent. Okay? So as they create these laws, it is the president who can really sign them into law. Okay? But pwede ra sad siya ma-sign into law without the signature of the president by inaction. Pwede sad siya. Okay? And upon this nation, as they implement the laws, ang judiciary mao'y warag guardian sad. Magbantay if there are laws implemented that could be not germane to our constitution. But, on the other hand, the executive department, whatever laws were implemented or created, enacted by the legislative department, they are meant to execute it. So if you look at the government, the president, they have branches under them. So we have Department of Education, etc. And we so happen to be part of the Department of Education. Okay? So, yung ana siya. So, whatever laws that were enacted, just like RA 9155, RA 10533, which established the kindergarten curriculum here in the Philippines, extended additional 2 years for our children, and RA 9155, which governed how we should deliver education. All these laws are meant to be executed by the Department of Education. Okay? And you try to look at it. The central office, as there is a legislation, will try to create the implementing rules and regulations for that. For instance, if you look at RA 9155, the subsequent laws, DepEd orders created are meant to execute or to implement, mo ng executive are meant to execute the laws. So when you execute these laws, sometimes general ra kay ang mga balaod. If you look at RA 9155, you need to read that from start to finish if you really want to pass your exam. It says there that you are mga general na mga statements diha. And it is up to the Department of Education to really enable the laws and the provisions of RA 9155. That's why we have DepEd orders, DepEd memorandum, DepEd advisory, sa paman office orders, etc. Okay, pangutanan ako ninyo. Do you know all these things? Do you know the difference between DepEd order and DepEd memorandum? Sige, magkuanta. Who can start, you can place in the chat box, what is the difference between DepEd orders and DepEd memorandum? That is something that we will master today. Okay, because that is very important in your journey as a principal. Okay, honestly, dagang kay principal nga wala kay baw about all these things. They tend to implement these laws improperly. So let's try to talk about that. What is the difference between DepEd memorandum and DepEd orders? Okay, memo is a reminder. Perfect, no? Okay. Reminder lang na mao na siya. Okay? Sige, ang sa palain. Si Ma'am Joy ragi mo answer. Thank you Ma'am Joy for answering. How about the others? Okay, so please participate. Okay, for Sir Raul, DepEd order is to be implemented in a longer period of time unless repealed, rescinded by another DepEd. I think that's one of the best answers. No, thank you Sir Raul. Okay, ang DepEd order is meant to be really implemented for the whole duration unless it is rescinded or replaced by another DepEd order. Okay, ang DepEd order is permanent according to Just Dada, while DepEd memorandum is temporary. Very good, perfect. Okay, DepEd order or insurance on policies and guidelines. Okay, or a reiteration of the policies and guidelines. We decide that's correct. Okay, while memorandum was a much shorter time na implement. Okay, very good. Usually the effectivity of a memorandum is only 1 year. So take note of that, ha. Ang DepEd memorandum is only effective for 1 year. Question, yes or no ra gini? Okay, thank you Ma'am Jen for your answer. DepEd order is mandatory. Okay, that's correct. Because the question here, that reminds me of a question. Mga kabangutana is a DepEd order does it have the same effect of a law? Okay? Because a law or a statute that is enabled and enacted by the Congress. The thing is a DepEd order really of the same power of a law? Okay? What do you think? Does it have the force of power of a law? Okay? So Ma'am Joy, no. Parang DO-doc bata ni RA. Ang sige pa sa Sir Roland. Okay? So, para ninyo, ang DepEd order, okay, no si Ma'am Jen, Raul, sa Ma'am Deborah is no, Ma'am Joy is no, okay? Ma'am Imelia says yes. Republic Act prevails, okay? But the question here is, as to DepEd orders, does it have the force and effect of a law? Okay? So, no ka Ma'am Tresita. Okay, so we are, in a sense, ambivalent about our answers, no? Pero tag natunga into two. Okay, some of you will say it has no effect of a force and effect of a law. And for others, it has a force and effect of a law. Okay, the answer is it has the force and effect of a law. Okay, so therefore, it is considered binding, no? Kanang DepEd orders are considered binding, no? You will know that DepEd orders are, or the essence here is that whatever decision manggod created by the department, especially the central office, has the presumption of regularity. Okay, so ingana na siya. No, the government assumes and really points to the direction of respect to the executive department as to the provisions and the policies they implement to enable the laws. Okay, so parihaan ng example ha, tagaan ta mo example. Katong vaccination. So that was a big issue here in Cebu, okay? Because some of the DepEd orders, if you look at it, was really dependent on the interagency provisions. Okay, interagency task force for COVID-19. Now, if you look at the interagency task force for COVID-19, it is actually a set of experts from the different departments of the executive department, including the Department of Health, etc. And they were put together to create policies. Okay? So this is an example of an administrative issuance or laws created. And the DepEd order was basically very dependent on that. So, but there were politicians who were against it because according to them, that is a constitutional violation of the rights of the people because there was a provision in the IATF that unvaccinated teachers were not allowed to report to school. So some of them were forced to be vaccinated because in the sense they were considered part of the government, no? So dapat unta sila mag-una. Okay, so that was the assumption during that time. But the thing is, once an issuance is created, you cannot really say na it's not put into effect unless the Supreme Court or a court of jurisdiction will declare it unconstitutional. Okay, kaya naaman siya presumption of regularity. Muna yung problema, no? Kinalang mo agi pa. Even if a politician will say no to it, it's considered binding, no? As of the implementation of that law. Okay, pero if you look at the Constitution, manggod, our movement, you cannot really restrict the movement of a person unless it is for public safety and public health. So, pangitaan na ninyo sa Constitution, nakasulat na diha. No? Pero mo lagi, mo managingon nga sa mga when we look at the law, manggod, okay, we are talking about the policy, ha? We are talking about this. Okay? Usually, even lawyers, even if they read the law, they are still, it will still be subjected to different interpretations. Okay? Depende ko no kung kinsay naghug sa jukebox o sensiyo. Okay? Pero honestly, that's not really something the right thing to do in terms of the interpretation of the law. Okay, but daghan siya angles nga pwede niyo tan-awon. That creates sometimes a problem with how we should follow our policies. So nakita ninyo no, I'm trying to show this to you because policies shape how we do our function in the Department of Education. This is how important it is. It's a matter of achieving our goals or not. Okay? From the words of our Vice President Sara, she said, it's not the fault of the teachers because we are in a system, they are placed in a system wherein they have no choice. So that is something for us to reflect upon. Okay? And remember, as principals, you are there to implement the policy. You may be empowered with the aura, the authority, the responsibility, but still, no, you cannot go against the general provisions of the law, especially the Constitution. If you violate the rights of the people, that's a no-no. Okay, ganda mong policy ha, kay buwa pa mo kita nagsugod, pero I'm trying to show it to you the importance of this topic, manggod. For instance, you talk about teachers who are having long hair. Yeah, kuan lang sila kanang technically, no, as to sex, they are males. They are males kay as to sex there are two kinds only, male and female. But as to gender expression, there are multiple ranges or spectrum of gender expression. Some of them might be considered lesbians, some of them may be considered as, you know, anything in between, no? Because it's a spectrum of gender expression. Now, if you are the principal, what is the policy of the Department of Education in terms of allowing teachers to have a long hair, no, ba mag-uniform siya pambabay because she has her own gender expression. Okay? How would you deal with that? So, muna kung pangutanan ninyo ko, no? In a sense, as the principal, how will you deal with that? Okay? Because we're talking about policies. Okay? What do you think? Any thoughts on that? Sige, what do you think? How should you implement? Are you going to allow the teacher to wear mag-cross-dress? Mag-long hair? Okay. Actually, Sir Raul has already answered, no? Ethical standard and code of ethics na lang siguro, Doc. Okay, very good. Okay. What does the ethical standard say? What will be your legal basis? Because if you look at it, policies are there to really kinahanglan kamo basta naagad mo yung argument sa inyong mga teachers. You should have a legal basis because your teachers are also good readers. Kabantay mo usahay mo isa sila, ma'am, according to DepEd order ana na yun. Okay. Okay, you will try to use RA 9155. Is it there in RA 9155? Maybe, perhaps, no? Basin, na provision diha. Okay? Sige. Actually, what matters most is you have a legal basis for your policies. Okay? For instance, remember that the Department of Education are government employees. So you think about that. If you are a government employee, remember, you are under civil service. Okay. So, pwede sa gamutan sa CSC because we are binded by the provisions of the CSC. And the Civil Service Commission memorandum, no, sa memorandum circular man ang ilaha usually, you will, if you try to see, there is a dress code for government officials. Okay, it may not be enshrined in a DepEd order, but it is under the CSC. Okay, so you try to check on the CSC provisions as to the proper sa mga tarong nga pagsulob sa sinina, unsay dapat sulubon, and it is we are binded as to that. So when you talk to your teacher, you should have a legal basis for everything. Okay? Sige na siya. Pero the question now is, how about if it's the learner? Okay. That's the problem. Okay? So, if it's a teacher, we are binded by the Civil Service Commission. But if it's a student, okay, a student wants to graduate, she's about to graduate, he is about to graduate, but she's a cross-dresser. She doesn't want to wear the proper attire na panglalaki kay technically he's considered as to sex as male. Now, are you going to allow the child to cross-dress during a ceremony where everyone sees it? Okay, hindi pa gid ka nang kanagay murag babae gid sa tanaw. Katong sa post pa sa one of the bloggers do I saw gi-share man gud to sa GC nga kanang ang iya dong tapad is murag hapon pa na nabayot. Sige. So if it's a child, a learner, will you allow that learner to cross-dress? What will be your legal basis? Okay? Sige daw, common na ning argument sa simbahan, Dok ba? Sige, that's correct. Okay, but in terms of kung religious gani siya, wag itay ko ana laban ana ha, because a lot of jurisprudence will tell us no nga kanang if it's religion that we're against to, walang kalaban-laban ang gobyerno. Just like if the child won't salute the flag during the flag ceremony, you are to allow the child not to salute. Okay? So mo na gitawag og religious benevolence, no? In our part in the government. Okay? Okay. Yes, pero I have no idea on the legal basis. That's really correct, Ma'am Jen, because there is no legal basis for that, because we cannot say no to that simply because there's no exact provisions yet given. Pero kung naamoy nakitaan ha, please provide us with that. Pero honestly, as I look at it, no, there's no provision yet, but there is a provision under gender equity. No, napag bullying act, patay na sa daan eh, no? Pero kanang bullying act, pwede nimo siya gamiton as a protection or a shield to the child. Mayon ka nga, please wear that as a convincing point. We don't want you to be bullied because honestly, feeling nimo ka ng laing gitan-awon ba? Okay? Considering ang iyang pamurma murag hapon ra na transform, so therefore murag jud siya subject for bullying. So that could be a convincing point, pero it's not really the exact provision, no? Nga telling us that we will allow or not allow a child. Okay? Sige, butang na to, school policy. Is a school policy binding to a child when there is a DepEd order telling us to respect gender expression? Okay? So, usahay dili siya germane. Remember, in the mission vision, there's a term there called gender sensitivity. Okay? So, yan na ba? We have to really look at how our orders are created. Okay? I'm talking about this because we have to understand that we can create our own policies, but our policies should not be against existing guidelines. Okay? And the problem is, here comes the problem. Gender expression and gender equity is well protected under our DepEd mission vision. DepEd Order 13 man siguro na. And there is also another provision, another DepEd order on gender equity. No, that we have to make sure that the gender expression of our learners are protected. Okay? So sometimes, if we create that GPTA or kanang general PTA nga provision, the question is, wouldn't that be struck down by the existing DepEd orders, which wherein it's not really relevant, it's not germane to the existing policies? Okay? So diha ta magkalisod. Okay? Diha ta magkalisod. Pero mo na gingon na mo nga gamitan na lang imong convincing power. Okay? Because as to provisions, policies, you cannot really do it. Okay? So mga good practices of the superintendents is, what they do is they try to organize the LGBTQ plus, and they have dialogue with their leaders. Okay. As to teachers, we can push because there is a civil service provision. As to learners, it's another story. Okay? And that's where your convincing power as the principal comes in. Pero kanay mong convincing power, it should be based on the idea of protecting the learners. Okay? Because we are there to protect our learners. No? Pareha ning gi-cite ni Sir Raul nga bullying act. No? Sige, Ma'am Judima, you have something to say, ma'am?
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes.
Punta ko, regarding ka na bitong, pwede na ba na siya, sir, no? Mag-set of rules and before mag-start ang enrollment, sir, pirmahan man na, sir, no? Sa mga ginikanan.
Yes.
Mag-enroll sila, aware ang ginikan nga mauni ang rules. Nya appeal ana ang uniform, appeal ana ang buhok. Pwede ba na siya, sir? Murag nga umanay na naanda na mo sa unas Placido pa, sir ba? Pwede na siya, sir? Nga mag-set of rules of policy kay murag wala man kana siya, sir, no?
Yes. Oh, honestly, any agreement, any policy will be respected. No? Wala na gina siya problema. Pero the thing is, if it's contrary to public policy, public order, okay, morals, something like ana, especially kanang gender expression could be something if you look at it, we have transcended already sa as to our laws ba. Okay? Although ang society wala kapas ana. No? Our society is still very nagyapon tayo ato ang biases ba. But if you look at it, even in other societies, more magyapon. But the thing is, I'm trying to share to you how complicated it is. No? That if any agreement is not compliant to any public order, public policy provision, it could be struck down. So what do I mean by be struck down? It means it is null, it is void. No? It doesn't have any binding effect. Okay, so kinahanglan gid na siya, ato na siyang in a way we can have that as a safeguard. No? That's a good practice. That's a good practice. At least we have this so-called presumption of regularity in everything that we do. Okay, so kung mapirma sila, then it's okay. Okay? Pero remember, still that could be nullified easily. Okay, kung naay mo reklamo, naay mo kuan, it could be nullified easily. Pero at least na mo kasulatan. you have your provisions ba nga. You have to understand nga this is our existing policy here. Okay? So again, as mga teachers, well, of course, you have a legal basis. So pirus na yun the Civil Service Memorandum Circular, no, as to the proper dress code. Okay, we are under civil service. In fact, kung kamo mag-habitual tardiness mo, di ba mimuhan mo sa civil service? Okay? So, ingana. So, what we usually do is to have clear conversations with them. That in the school, bahalag sa gawas, you can actually do that. But here in our level, in the school premises, to avoid bullying, you can talk to them. So that's what a good leader does. We try to implement, no, kabantay mo sa 2, career stage 2, you should be able to undertake the policy and implement it properly. And knowledge of law is very important. Okay? Knowledge of law is very important. I can't stress this enough. A lot of principals tend to create their own policies. They are not even aware of the laws and provisions that they have to be very sensitive of. One very good habit of a principal is that you should be able to read DepEd orders, interpret them properly, please. Because sometimes, sir, I read DepEd orders every day. Pero ang pag-interpret is sometimes wrong. Being able to interpret and understand it properly in the context of how law should be interpreted is very important. Okay? Although, no, I'm not saying there's a perfect interpretation as to everything. Even lawyers, even experts of law, judges, differ in their interpretation of the law because any words could be subject to different interpretation. Pero as much as possible, laws are designed in such a way that multiple interpretation is avoided. Or otherwise, it will be struck down. Career stage 3, we just want everyone to be involved. We want to talk to them where your negotiating skills will come into play. And career stage 4, you'll be able to recommend already to the people. So what are the DepEd orders that you have to read? First and foremost, you have to read DepEd Order 13, series of 2015. It's entitled Establishment of a Policy Development Process at the Department of Education. So if you read this from start to finish, you'll be able to understand how our DepEd orders are created. Remember, this was promulgated on April 13, 2015. It means it's quite new. Pila na siya ka years? It's 8 years in the making. Not in the making, but in the implementation. So if you wanted to learn more about that, how we created that, you listen carefully because we're going to talk about how this is implemented. But we're also going to talk about incidental issuances, which is important in your work as a school head. So aims to establish a policy development process that provides for systematic, evidence-based, and participatory mechanism. So, take note of the key words. We want it to be systematic, siya proseso. It should be evidence-based, meaning it should be research-based. So, sometimes we implement policies and then we don't even have evidences as to the basis of what we have done. And participatory mechanisms and procedures for the formulation, adoption, and review of policies issued by the DepEd Central Office. Remember, our policy-making body is the central office. When I say policy-making, I'm referring to the IRR, in the implementing rules and regulations, guidelines to help and enable the implementation of laws in the department, specifically in the delivery of quality education to our learners. Remember the keywords. Evidence-based, meaning kanang evidence-based, no? Very close to evidence-based. There's no other way to really gather evidence but through research. Meaning, you try to either gather research or gather evidence on your own, which will be your basis for the promulgation of these policies. Okay? It's systematic because it follows a step-by-step process. And lastly, very important, participatory. We want everyone to be involved, especially the people in the grassroots, in order for them to provide inputs. Pangutana, kuanta mga real life scenarios. You have heard about the shifting of the responsibility in terms of collecting information as to the pantawid learners. And the Department of Education has issued a policy directing it to the Secretary of the DPWH. DSWD de. As to the DSWD, nga they will be the one who will be collecting data. Now, question, is it really a burden on the part of the teachers as to the collection of the data of the DSWD? Or is it because of the principal giving the responsibility to the teachers instead of having it as his responsibility to collect the information? So that is the debate now. It was debated whether or not these are really responsibilities of the teachers. Because according to them, it is the responsibility of the principal really, and it's designated to the teachers. Pareho sa MOE, good. Same issue with the MOE. And it so happens that the teachers are also the one liquidating already because honestly, the principal is the only non-teaching personnel in schools. Okay, so if they want if they really wanted the teachers not to be burdened with all these things, they need to provide additional non-teaching personnel. Okay, and actually that's already heard, no? ADOF were designed to be part of the schools, additional non-teaching personnel in all schools. Pero sa nitaburon, the ADOF were not detained or detailed in the schools. They were instead detailed in the district offices because it's not as to 1:1 ratio. Well, in fact, the intent of the law there is to provide additional non-teaching personnel in order for the reports to be done by the ADOF instead of by the teachers. So, daghan kitang makita ba na the intent is here, but the implementation sometimes is not really aligned to the intent of the law. Mo na yung mga problema karon. So, dapat unta, ideally, ilan na lang tatong gitagsa-tagsa gyud, no? 1:1. So, one school, I don't know if that is what happened to all your school. Okay? So, as you can see, that is where the gaps in our implementation comes in. And if kuwang-kuwang sa ang ilang ihatag nga item, that results to a lot of problems. Okay? For instance, we wanted all our schools to have a principal item because it's a school per se, di ba? So it should have a principal item. But what is happening now? The items really are not 1:1. One school as to 1:1. Okay? So if we want really change on these aspects, it's important nga pero it's quite limited in terms of budget, manggod. Okay, so as a result, wasay passer. So muna limited kaayo. So all these things are limitations. Muna gingon nga we are here, no? To actually provide. So kung maabot ka career stage 4, it means you'll be able to provide suggestions in shaping our policy. But sometimes we try to change policy by just posting in Facebook in not convincing way of doing it. So that's a good thing, Ma'am Francisca, no? Na amoy bookkeeper, na amoy disbursing. So tulo na mo. And ako pangutan na is, will the bookkeeper and the disbursing be willing to also do additional tasks? Diba? Aside from being a bookkeeper and a disbursing officer. So, although they are under you, no, you have to convince them. Kay the teachers mangani, they sometimes go beyond, no? Ikaw as principal, you go beyond your responsibilities. So, it's important for us to also lead them. Public service mangini ato, no, that we are providing all these important services. Okay, but I'm just sharing this to you because these are real situations in the field. Sige, so ideally, if you want to change policy, pwede ka mo sulod, no, among these different aspects, no? You can go for evidence-based. So if you want to shape policy, you do research. Ayaw pag-rant diya sa Facebook because ranting in Facebook won't do anything. Conduct a research. Put all your rant in your research because those are, make it a qualitative research so that you can put all your rant in qualitative or through words. So also, you can go through participatory mechanisms. So, participatory mechanisms, as we'll learn later on, has two kinds: the formal and the informal. So, you can participate in consultations. If they ask, pilian naman sana katong mga insightful kayo, pwede sad, or known for your expertise on that particular subject, then you might be consulted. You can also present issues and concerns using our SMEA. Pero sayang man, the problem with our system sometimes ba, honestly, is SMEA sometimes is just for the sake of compliance. When the problems sprang out, what do our leaders do? No, they bring it back to the teacher. Like for example, we have students who are non-readers. Okay, mo na problem. And then the higher up will say, or the person in authority will say, is that our responsibility to teach the learners? Why are you putting it there? So as early as that level, it will be struck down. So when it reaches the central office, there's no problem anymore. So these are problems, no? Ako honestly, I've seen like problems in Lardos. No, we deny their existence. We say that, sir, we don't have any learners at risk of dropping out. All of them are very eager to go to school. And then wala mi hagbong, sir. No failing students. All of them are 75. So, kada ding 75 mo ni hagbong. So, these are realities in our work that we have to understand. No, they are part of our system. But I hope that's why I'm trying to preach here, because we need leaders who are really insightful, because there is so much to do, so much work to do in the Department of Education. Don't forget our PISA result. We are at the bottom. We are at the bottom. And our denial is the reason for all of this. Okay? And there is hope with our secretary when she mentioned all these problems. Okay, sige. So, magmaraton na ta. In RA 9155, it vests DepEd with accountability and responsibility. Okay, policies should be adequate and integrated system which are integrated, relevant to the goals of national development. So you have to be compliant to the existing regulations. It was observed that there were conflicting provisions. So before, there were a lot of conflicting provisions. Magbuot sa nga principal usa, and others are not germane to really the purpose and intent of the Department of Education. So you have to be clear, no? A scope of policy, this includes DepEd policies promulgated by various offices. So basically in the central office, this is what they do. Procedural map for the formulation, we're going to discuss that. What are policies? Policies are principles, rules, and regulations, guidelines to systematic, evidence-based, and participatory process. Serves as a guide to its personnel and all stakeholders, and it reflects the value of the department. Okay? As to DepEd issuances, policies are embodied through issuances. So there are many kinds: DepEd order, DepEd memorandum, office order, office memorandum, DepEd advisory. Okay, so these are niya. Kamo pwede sad mo mag-create og office memorandum sa inyong eskwelahan. But remember, these policies should be germane to the existing DepEd orders. Dili mo pwede ka buot-buot. So as much as possible in the first part of your DepEd order, in your office memorandum, in your school, it's only for dissemination. And then number 2, if it's a policy, you should have a legal basis. So in pursuant to DepEd order, something like dihagin mag-start ang imuhang office memorandum sa school level. Later on, I'll teach you how to create your office memorandum, because there are a lot of office memorandum which is not compliant, no, to the existing regulations that we have. So you read this one. Ang pinaka-highest nga DepEd issuance is either 2. We have DepEd order and DepEd memorandum. So these government strands can actually release, no, and these are the signatories, and these are the final approving authority. Okay, duly signed by the officer in charge, and can be delegated to undersecretariat of each strand, kanang DepEd memorandum. Now, each of the strand in the central office can issue office order or office memorandum. So the following are given, no, the authority to sign. Okay, so muna sila. So under their strand ra. So there are many strands manggod, like Bureau of Learning Delivery, okay, whatever it is, under NIAP, nasa director diha. So all these are their issuances. pertinent to their strand. Okay, ang advisory side, if you try to look at it, there's no signature needed, but it it is for dissemination of training, seminars nga could be opportunities for our people. Okay, tanawan ninyo ni, very important ni siya. I want you to study this carefully. Ang DepEd orders are established DepEd policies may contain accompanying procedures of policy implementation. So, na siya step-by-step process. How you do it, no? What are the regulations? Step. And look at the effect. Mandate or constrain actions or behavior among DepEd stakeholders. Create rights and obligation in the furtherance of DepEd's mandate. So, it has a force and effect of a law. Kani mo yung Sir Raul ganino. Usually long-term, permanent in nature unless rescinded or amended by another DepEd order. See? Perfect na si Raul. That's the answer. Then, the scope and scale usually concern DepEd-wide issues. So, tanan yun. No? Usually DepEd-wide, national in application. So, issued by the central office and signed by the secretary or alter ego of the president. Remember, the secretary is an alter ego of the president, equated to the president, no, at that level. Ang memoranda, tanawan ninyo, disseminate instructions, information, related matters, no? May mandate or constraint action. May ra yun. Mandate ang sa DepEd orders, may ra dire. May create rights. So, may or may not. No? It's optional. Usually short-term, temporary in application. So, as long as a certain activity exists, or a certain school year exists, or while generally it should be effective for 1 year only. Okay, generally na ha. Pero if the context of the DepEd memorandum is as to that particular activity, it is effective as to that activity. Like for example, in the implementation of the Brigada Eskwela for this year, that's usually stated in the DepEd memorandum. In the provision of the NQESH, no? For this year. So, DepEd memorandum na. So, di ka magtanaw sa DepEd order kay kung i-order na nila for the succeeding test examination, it will be like that. Just like the PPSH, it's issued through a DepEd order because di mo na siya for 1 year lang. Okay? So, may refer to DepEd-wide matters or specific concern, central office. So, mo na siya yung difference. You have to master that and understand. Nasa kay office order. So, under the central office na may office orders. Okay, so maura ilang nature. Then advisories, conduct of programs, projects, activities requested by the local and national. Do not create rights and obligations. So, optional lagi na, no? It may be in a DepEd advisory, but it is optional. Okay, pangutana, how should you format, no, your DepEd? What is the format of the DepEd order? Okay, so remember we have 2 issuances that we need to master sa porma niya. But you have to master the different parts. So, ano yung letterhead, na kanang 3 is control number kung naa. Then, concerned officials. Although there is a latest issuance as to this. Ato sa ko sa ipakita ninyo ni. Okay? So, you have to read it. Okay? So, when they create their DepEd orders, dapat mag-fill up sila ng form na rational, policy summary, relationship with the existing policy regulations so that it will be rescinded or amended, it will be written there. Okay? Then you have to determine consistency. Okay, now, when you create your own office memorandum in your respective schools, you should also go through this policy proposal summary kung pwede because it will help you understand the regulations and if you are actually aligned, no? So, tanawa, ang central office, ingani gani ila ha. They try to align it with existing provisions. Since we are an enabling office or a field office, we have to make sure that we are aligned. Okay, so you may use this policy proposal summary kung maghimo mo og inyong school memorandum or office memorandum. So, we have RIS and M&E. Okay, so na numbering system here. I hope you will catch up with this. Kana gani mga OSEC, FA, CI, GLO, na siya mga meaning, legal and legislative affairs, muna mga strands, no? Governance and operations, curriculum and instructions, finance and administration. Unya, I think Vice President Sara's created additional strands, no? So pwede na siya kay under her power to promulgate the laws, no? So next is basahan ninyo ang DepEd Order 30 series of 2019. This is a very important law, DepEd order that you have to master. Why? because it dictates how you need to conduct. So I think naamoy session yun ani, pero I just like to share lang very important points, no? How you need to create your office memorandum. It should be at this format, ha? Don't forget yun. And then kanang advisory, this is how it should look like. Your letters, no? Is there a way to write letters? Of course, no? It's already provided by DepEd Order 30 series of 2019. Unya, when we receive letters from your office, in my office personally, it's quite frustrating that we receive letters not compliant to this format. So there are only two kinds, no? Kani block ni siya, kani semi-block. So tanawa ninyo ang format ana, no? Did you know that there is an issuance now, latest issuance from VP Sara, that if you fail to follow the DepEd Manual of Styles, you will be charged administratively. Okay, so take note of that. You are a principal and you should be informed of our laws and regulations. If you cannot follow simple rules and regulations in our department, how can you implement the laws and regulations to your school if you're not reading DepEd orders? So, at least ba, kanang protektaran lang muna mo kay you are part of this system that we have. So, make sure you are compliant. Master this format. So, kung mag-semi-block ka, moniporma. Notice that there's no line here. No line here as to your header. No? That is how you should write using the DepEd Manual of Styles. Okay? Then there's another DepEd order here. It's called DepEd Order 31 series of 2019. No? The DepEd Service Marks and Visual Identity Manual. Okay? So in this case, in this DepEd order, dapat uniform ang the way we actually present, no, and use the logo. Okay, are you creating logos like this? No, that is a distortion. You're not allowed to do that. No, using a different angle, gipakilid-kilid, adding elements such as underline, wrong. No, changing the font, wrong. Adding distracting background, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, so if you do that, you are violating DepEd Order 31. So mga general provisions lang na. Are you allowed to have this at your background? Kanang naaboy daghan nakita nako sa Facebook, no, that they use this as a spreading pattern. No, you're not allowed to do that. Okay? Then your headers, no, division lang ta. Take note of all this old English text, no? Old English text gid siya nga font kanang Republic of the Philippines. Kung wala mo ana, i-install ninyo ang font because you are from the Department of Education. Okay? Name of office is Tahoma. Trajan Pro ang o name of the regional office. Okay, naamoy division seal here at the ang uban. Sorry lang gid kay ha, but this has been a DepEd order since 2019 up until now 2023. They're still using another header. Sir, that is our style, sir. In our division, we have our own style of doing the header and footer. You are violating DepEd Order 31 series of 2019. Oh, for God's sake, let's be compliant to this, because according to this provision, you are only allowed a year from the promulgation of this act, this order, to actually use your previous headers. Okay? If you don't comply, then there's another order from Vice President Sara that you will be subject to administrative case. Okay? So, how about if you're a principal, which you are? No? So, what will you do? This is how it should look like. No? So, please be sensitive with the font lang here and the size. Okay? So, your school should be at the bottom. No, please. At the bottom, please. Not at the top. Still, school heads are placing it here. No, ako, honestly, in the now, it took me around 8 months to really consistently remind them. Ambot na, nakasuko na siguro sila nako, sige, og wiris-wiris sa ilahang tanan documents, but I cannot just ignore it because pero nagadugay kuandra kay with the issuance of Sara's DepEd order, then okay na. So everyone should be compliant to that. Okay? So I hope you got this. How about this when you send letters, di ba? In an envelope. Take note of that, ha? In preparation of a certificate of appreciation. Don't forget, we have a policy on that. Even certificates wherein you did some partnerships, then your sample certification should be like this. Okay, so there's ID. No, I've seen division offices with wrong ID. Okay, not compliant to DepEd Order 31 series of 2019. At that was 4 years ago, but up until now we're still not following the order. Sa ganito definition sa DepEd Order, it's mandatory, di ba? It's a mandate. And why is it that you're creating your own laws? Di ba? You're creating your own mandate. No, you are part of the Department of Education. Unity of marks and visual identity. Okay, go ahead and check your ID. Okay, if you are like this, no, make sure that it's compliant to this. Name tag for any orientation should be like that. Even advocacy materials and your t-shirt. Then this is a steamer background. Oh, look at your your steamers in your official activity in the Department of Education. Is that how you prepared it? Okay, oftentimes daghan kayo no, ang logo na to na daghan tanan, welcome. So this is the proper way of doing it. Okay, so it's all there, no, in the DepEd Order. Again, Master DepEd Order 31 and Master DepEd Order 30, both 2019. Nagsunod na sila, 30, 31, series of 2019. Both of them are very important. No, you have to learn to, you really read it from start to finish. Non-negotiable. So let's talk about the policy development process. How were this created? So there are actually 5 phases. Start with a agenda setting, then you formulate your policies, formulation, and then policy adaptation, implementation, and policy review. So stages are not exclusively in one direction. One may return to the previous one as necessary. So you may return to any of the stages. This is how it looks like. So did you notice that's a broken line? So sa agenda setting, mo na yung una. But when you create your policy, no, you can always, or your policy options, you can always go back to the policy agenda anytime. So that's how it is. No, it's an iterative process. It can go back to any of the steps. Notice here the bigger lines. No, like when you create your policy, you can go to policy amendment. No, policy amendment starts. You can go policy amendment and go back to your policy agenda. Okay, and then in agenda setting, no, you try to identify the policy gaps issues. So, may salute to VP Sara for really identifying the gaps and issues. Okay, after doing that, no, you try to accept that there's a problem. Okay, so you try to make an official long-term or short-term policy agenda. Could either be gathered formally or informally. So kanang formal, again, it's consultations and official meetings. Informal includes issues and concerns from external stakeholders. So you have 2 gateways to actually input in the agenda setting. And then we have policy formulation. So at this stage, the general policy gaps, issues, areas, no, trends, goals, and other concerns which were approved with the EXICOM are part of the policy agenda for the conduct of policy analysis. Daghan kag paagi ani, you formulate alternative policy. So kaning magong creation of alternative policies, madugo ni siya nga proseso. You have to create possible scenarios of policy, no. In fact, this is one research. I have created a research on this for my Saldiwa and my Gabay, wherein we create policy alternative scenarios. And what will happen if we implement each of these scenarios? It's a long study, no? But you have to be very detailed with this. You have to imagine and simulate what happens as you implement a particular policy. So, manindot kayo pagkabuhat if ideally this will be implemented. So, wala pa ni, napas siya sa papel. Policy formulation. Okay? So, ingana may tabuan ng policy formulation. Just read the DepEd order, ha? Ako lang siyang gisummarize for you to really understand what happens. So, we also take into consideration in policy formulation, kaning gitawag nila og unintended consequences. They are part of the hard work that you need to understand. Because when you implement a policy, there is a great tendency that there will be unintended consequences. Consequences that you thought will bring a great effect or help to the people, but honestly, it will bring chaos, no? Possible chaos to the people in the field if you are not very sensitive as to the policy. Remember, the higher level you go, no, principal pa man no. So una, teacher, ako kag effect. Ma-principal gani ka, the higher your effect. But also at the same time, little of your actions also has a drastic effect to other people. I'll give you an example, ha. You look at the president, no? The president. You remember Duterte. Si Duterte magluya gani, dako na kay nga issue. Nagluya ra guys siya. Nagluya ra siya because it's a matter of stability of the government kung magluya ang presidente. Everything he says are given a lot of importance. Every word, every breath, every balikas nga iyang isulti is a big issue on the news. So the higher position you go, your slight movements, your slight change of attitude will have dire effects on the people that you lead. Same way with us, no? The higher position you are, your action, little it's as it may be for you, but it will cause a great effect to the people. Kaya na doon Duterte, mingon siya nga, oh, patayin niyo yan. Oh, usara ka word, di ba? O dagan na kay patay. Oh. Unya, mayon na sa sila nga ayo pasinginli ang presidente kay dili man siya nagpatay ana something ana. So it's a debate no whether kuan, pero the slight words that he mentioned will have a great effect on the ones implementing because he is the most powerful person, considered the most powerful person in the land. So ing ana no, so remember the higher position you are, the little actions you do will have dire consequences to your people. So you have to be very careful. Dana mo ko eh. So you have to be very careful, no? So ingana. So upon creating your policy formulation, you now proceed to policy adoption. So kuana sign na sa secretary and it becomes a DepEd order, no? It will be assigned a control number. Then it will be published in deped.gov.ph. Would like to share this, ha? Dagan kay mangutanan ako, sir. Asa dito mag-download og DepEd order? If you're a principal ba, mahangyo ko, ha? You should know www.deped.gov.ph. Please lang, mahangyo ko. Everyone should know that that is the website wherein we download DepEd orders. Don't forget that palihog. Okay, again, deped.gov.ph, you search that. Okay, then first 3 certified true copies, tanan. So all these steps are being conducted. Okay, so dapat searchable siya, circulate din kag copies. Okay, yan ay digital copy. So this is the part, no? And then we will now implement. So kamo na yun, no? In the division offices, then we can conduct training, seminars, okay, and then guided monitoring and evaluation. Okay? Then policy review dayon. We look at how the policy is now shaping our instruction. So muna na is MEA, pangutanong mo na ba issues and concerns. Okay? And then the PRD shall submit results of policy evaluation in the EXICOM. Okay, so I think that's basically everything, no, about policy implementation. Okay, so before I end, no, I think we have already included, di naman tayo mag-quiz is, kay we have already included in our previous discussion. Okay, but before I end, it's important for us to reflect how our policies are being shaped. You as the school head, when a policy is created, you have the responsibility to ensure that these policies are implemented in your respective schools. No one is above the law. Remember, DepEd orders are there to change, no, on how we do things, and it guides how we do things. Very important lang, sometimes there is also a need for us to be sensitive with our people. Okay, a leader should be balanced with policies, regulations, at the same time with the context of your people. A good balance between them helps us create an environment of trust and understanding with our people. So it springs out from your ability to listen, no, and to understand the plight of your people. At the same time, balance it with the policies. As future leaders, no, or as leaders of the Department of Education, I am praying and hoping you'll be able to start creating this change. Hopefully, you have watched again and again the speech of and the policy direction provided by our Vice President and the DepEd Secretary. And try to reflect how are you going to contribute to the realization of these goals. Okay. Honestly, there is much to do in our department. And it takes a lot of effort for us to implement these changes. Pero why don't we join hands? Because what is at stake is the future of our children. If naamoy mga anak, naamoy apo, or for the sake lang of legacy, no, we should work for a better Philippines, a better learner. And honestly, grabe kayong impact sa pandemic sa itong mga bata. You look everywhere. Learners, grade 3, grade 4, cannot read. Grade 5, grade 6, who are not equipped with the necessary skills. So yeah, we have to do something about this. And it all starts with a very hardworking and passionate school leader to make a difference, no, in the life of the learners that are under them. Okay? So I hope you learned something from my session. Okay? Be an expert, no? Last lang advice. This will help you in your tests. At the same time, this will help you with your life. Be a good reader, no? First thing in the morning, read the ped orders. So that should be the routine that you should do. Because everything we do in the department revolves around these issuances. And mao tanong kung inunta sa mga teacher nga, sir, naara ba yung deped order ngayong ani niya? Muana pa ka nga isa haba, basahon sa nalako, kaya upo ko kabasaan na. Okay, we should be at least one step ahead.